It's the Austin Mayoral Forum. I'm Sonta Henderson, and I'll be moderating today's discussion for Austin PBS. We extended an invitation to all 6 Austin mayoral candidates, and 3 of those candidates are with us today. We'd like to welcome Phil Brual.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Representative Celia Israel.
Hello.
Hi. And Senator Kirk Watson.
Hello, good to be with y'all.
Thank you. Welcome to all of you. Today's forum will be approximately 1 hour. Candidates will each have 1 minute and 30 seconds for opening remarks. Then we'll move on to the question and answer segment. Members of the Austin community were invited to submit questions for today's forum. The candidates were provided general topics, but they were not given specific questions in advance. The topics the community wants to hear about today are affordability, homelessness, park space and equity, transportation, Latinos in Austin, climate change, land code and small business, disabilities, and downtown safety. Each candidate will have 1 minute to answer. If I have follow-up questions, the candidates will have 30 seconds to respond. If one candidate mentions another by name, that person will have 30 seconds for a response. You'll notice yellow and red light indicators at the top right corner of the screen that signal elapsed time. When the yellow light appears, the allotted time means you have 15 seconds remaining. The red light indicates 5 seconds remain. The flashing red light means you need to wrap up. We ask that all candidates respectfully follow the rules. At the conclusion of today's discussion, each candidate will have 1 minute and 30 seconds for closing remarks. In the interest of fairness, opening statements will be in alphabetical order and closing statements will be in reverse alphabetical order. The order for question and answers were selected at random. So let's get to it. For their opening statements, several community members wanted to know what it's like to run a campaign and why you want to be mayor. You each have 1 minute and 30 seconds. First up is Phil Brual.
Hello, my name is Phil Brual. I'm a born and raised Austinite, born in South Austin, grew up here my entire life. When it comes to running a campaign, it's really hard and you're very hands-on. Takes up way too many hours. Sometimes I'll be up at 6 a.m. doing stuff. Sometimes I'll be up at midnight. And the hardest part is really just balancing it with my work schedule, being a student full-time, working at the Capitol, my part-time jobs. You know, it's a lot of work, but it's worth it. But that's one of the reasons why I'm running. This city has consistently been ran by people who are out of touch with what Austinites deal with on a daily basis. We have people who sympathize with us, but they sit in lofty penthouses and they look down. I am one of the real Austinites here. I pay high rent. I share 2 bathrooms with 4 other roommates, and I have to deal with outrageous inflation, affordability issues, and overall different things in this city. It is time for this city to start investing in its people, in its culture. We've traded local businesses and restaurants for corporations. We've traded musicians, artists. We've traded them for realtors who charge way too much. This city needs to get back on what it loves. And I'm not saying we need to go back in time. We always must take steps towards the future. But we need to cherish the things that we love about this city and preserve what we love. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brual. Next, we have Representative Celia Israel.
Hey, thank you for the time today. My name is Celia Israel. I'm a member of the Texas House of Representatives, been serving for 4 terms, proudly standing up and defending this city when it needed defending on the floor of the Texas House on a variety of issues, whether that was women's bodily autonomy, immigrant rights, transportation issues, gun safety measures, and issues that really matter to the working men and women of Austin, Texas. I'm excited to be running. What's it like to be running? It's all emotions all at once. You're anxious, you're excited, and most often the adjective that comes to mind is I am honored. It's an honor to have been elected by the people of House District 50 in 2014. It's the honor of my life. It's my mother was a big fan of Barbara Jordan. and instilled in me a respect for public service. My political mother was the late great Governor Ann Richards, who instilled in me the same concepts around public service, but also surround yourself with good people, keep your sense of humor for God's sake, and focused on the people. You can never go wrong. Following your heart, you can never go wrong. I'm running to be a mayor for all of Austin, and I look forward to our discussion today about the issues that are driving me to run, because they're big and they're serious. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Kirk Watson, you'll wrap up the opening statements.
Well, thanks. I'm excited to get to be here, and I'll start with the part of the question about what it's like to run for mayor. I love it, in part because I love the connection that you end up with people in the community. It's a rare kind of connection where you get to hear from them. You get to hear their hopes, their dreams, their problems, their concerns, and you learn so much as part of that. So it's always kind of an energizing activity. Even when you start early and you go all day long and you're tired, you're energized and excited. And really that's the reason I'm running for mayor. I've been mayor of Austin, Texas. I was mayor from 97 to 2001. I was represented Austin in the Texas Senate from 2007 until 2020. I was then the founding dean of the Hobby School of Public Affairs at the University of Houston. The reason I'm running for mayor again is because I love this city. I love the people of this city, and we're at a turning point. We're no longer becoming a big city. We are a big city. And what we're going to need as we try to establish what kind of city we want to be 10 and 20 years from now, and of course in the immediate future, we're going to need to have leadership that is proven, has demonstrated the ability to get big things done, and can build consensus. I bring that to this. I look forward to being mayor again because, as I say, I love Austin.
Thank you, Senator Watson. We'll now move into the heart of the forum and talk about the issues that are important to Austinites. As a reminder to the candidates, your answers will be limited to 1 minute. Our first topic is on the minds of so many people in Austin, and that's affordability. We have some questions that community members recorded. Take a listen.
My concern is affordability, particularly for seniors.
What will you do to make Austin affordable, housing affordable?
There's a lot of temporary workers in the city of Austin who they also need health insurance and a good hourly wage. I think they've been excluded from some of the increases that have been proposed and maybe enacted at the city of Austin for a higher basic living wage. What about those temporary workers? Can we bring them up to having real jobs, full-time with benefits?
My question is, right now, Austin, with the property taxes and affordability rates, what is your plan to help kind of fix those or bring those down so that lifelong Austinites can actually stay in Austin instead of having to move further and further away?
Mr. Brual, let's start with you. How would you address affordability in Austin?
Thank you so much for the question. One of the first steps that we need to do is looking at the development code. Austin has tried to target this before with Code Next, but with lack of transparency, with a lack of understanding, it failed. But when we change that development code, or at least start taking steps on what we can start allowing for more multifamily housing. And I'm not necessarily saying apartment complexes on every block, but including duplexes, triplexes, and different situations to where we can have more supply for the market. So we have more houses to drive down those prices to allow the people who work for the city to actually live in the city and have their voices. When you have more people into the city, you then have more people paying into taxes. You have more people paying into the system, so then we can lower property taxes. So rather than just consistently relying on homeowners to pay these amounts, we can then provide benefits to them, reduce their property taxes over yearly periods so that everyone can actually enjoy these affordability.
Representative Israel?
Yeah, Sonta, I introduced a housing and affordability plan in June after launching my campaign in January, and I have been listening to the people much like those we just heard from. It is not equitable or just that we continue to push people out to the edge of our city or our region and then expect them to come in to dress our wounds and teach our kids. This is a housing supply issue, and I have said every week in an Israel administration will be housing and affordability week. More details are at celiafораustin.com, but to summarize, we need to be doing public good with public places. We own 6,000 tracts of land that we have studied and studied and studied. We can rethink commercial space to where it can rebuild community and be in sync with our transit system and our future transit and transportation systems. Thank you so much.
Senator Watson.
Yes, this is one of those issues you hear about all the time, everywhere. As I indicated in my opening statement, that you learn so much about what people are wanting to see. The first part of this, there's no question we're in a cost of living emergency in this town. And the first part of that is housing. Everything from fixing the permitting system so that the time value of money is respected, to dealing with the land development code, to using our transit corridors the way they ought to be used. I have a plan for that, and I've talked about details, but there's a flip side of that coin. And one of the questioners mentioned it when she talked about temporary workers. We need to make sure that we're doing right by the workers in this community. And that would mean making sure they have benefits, because that's also part of how you afford. I've also got a plan for how we deal with childcare, the second largest expense, and how we get people into good career paths so that they'll be able to afford to stay in Austin.
Thank you all. Okay, now we just talked affordability, and that leads us to our next topic, homelessness. From downtown to under the freeways at Ben White, I-35 and 183, you don't have to look far to see that homelessness is prevalent in the city. You can see people with full-blown tents and sofas living under freeways. We had many questions about when public camping was banned and the encampments were cleared. As mayor, how would you make a difference in the lives of our homeless citizens? Senator Watson, you'll answer first.
Thank you. This is a big issue in part because we have been left, I believe, with really an all or nothing sort of proposition. People living anywhere they want on the street anytime versus trying to have permanent supportive housing as was defined by buying hotels and motels. I support permanent supportive housing, but what I also support is that we have more in between. We have more congregate shelters. We have the ability to get people into speedy, quick into housing so that they don't fall into long-term homelessness or chronic homelessness. We need to address the entire continuum as opposed to the way we've addressed it. This is particularly true when we have to enforce the camping ban. We have to have places for people to go. And the last thing I'll say, we're running out of time, is we need to focus on mental health, and I have background in that.
Senator Watson, a follow-up for that. You just mentioned mental health and preventing long-term chronic homelessness. What are some things you would do to address that issue?
Two things that I'll mention immediately. There are more than that, but I'll mention two. One is we need to be looking at how when we have somebody that has a mental health crisis, a brain health crisis, and they are coming out of that crisis. In other words, competency is restored, although they're not cured, but competency is restored, that we don't just put them back out on the street. We need to have some form of therapeutic housing so that they'll be in a position to get stabilized and then have a place to go. And the second thing I would say is what I was saying about early housing, getting people into housing instead of waiting for permanent supportive housing.
Okay, Representative Israel.
Yeah, Sonta, this is another part of when I talk about a housing crisis. It is a factor of a lack of housing supply, all kinds of supply, regardless of your zip code, regardless of how much you make. We have unhoused neighbors who are not just data points. They are our neighbors with a real story. I've met with them over time. I went to the warming shelter this spring that the Urban League was sponsoring to volunteer myself to say, here's some goodies. Here's some water, here's some toilet paper. Well, how did you get to this place and where are you going to go? Giving them a ride where they felt safe. It was tragic and sad. The last place they wanted to go was to the Arch or to the Salvation Army. I have visited the Sunrise Navigation Center there at Ben White in Menchaca. This is a faith-based organization that has housed over 700 individuals without a dollar from the city or the county.
Representative, follow-up for you would be, you talked about meeting with some of these people in the community. What do you think about substance abuse and help for some of the people who don't have those options available as well?
Thanks for the follow-up, Sonta. There's a new coalition of nonprofits in our community that we know their names. It's Family Elder Care, Urban League, the Safe Alliance, and Caritas. They've been around here forever. They know the community so much better than we do. They can help those people who have layers of problems that need to be addressed by professionals so that they are in a safe, dignified place for their lives with a social worker, with a nurse, with mental health supports. We can do it. They need a good partner with the city of Austin.
Mr. Brual?
The problem with Austin is that we consistently try to solve the problem ourselves. The city does qualify for a lot of federal money that sort of takes the weight off of the taxpayer's shoulders. However, we shouldn't be using this money ourselves. Here in Travis County, there are thousands of nonprofits, many of them dealing with homelessness. They've done all the research. They have boots on the ground. They've helped a lot of the homeless here in Austin. 3 years ago, Austin tried to do 3,000 beds in 3 years, and 3 years later, we aren't even close. And yet these nonprofits have been able to take a lot of people off the streets, provide them with mental health care, deal with substance abuse, and do these things that we're asking for. Yet they haven't received any of our money. Some have, some haven't. But what we can do for $1, they can do for 50 cents. Maybe they can even do it for cheaper. So rather than using that federal money and we being the leader in this community or consistently wasting dollars, we should be taking that money and giving it to these nonprofits, building a better relationship with these nonprofits, because we need to stop being the city on the hill and let the experts take over.
Mr. Brual, you talk about letting the experts take over, but what do you say to those who say that, well, we're the city, we have to make sure the dollars are being spent properly?
I would definitely agree. I mean, when we build these relationships with these nonprofits, it does include accountability, making sure that they're doing what they need to be doing, making sure that they're transparent. But we also have to realize that these nonprofits, this is what they're built to do. This is what their goals are. If anything, they would probably be more responsible than the city of Austin. If we just look at the past couple of years, look at different projects, look at how your tax money has been spent. Do you feel that they have been responsible? And at this point, I would trust a nonprofit before I trust the city of Austin with my money.
Thank you. Well, quality of life is a topic you'll hear many people talking about in the city. People want places to take their families, things to do in their respective neighborhoods, especially those who aren't near downtown, centrally located, or in highly developed areas. So these next questions deal with issues of park space and equity in Austin. Take a listen.
What are the plans to increase the number of parks in an area of the city where kids and families don't have a park in walking distance?
Just a focus on education, equity, access to things like parks and libraries, not just for families who have the means, but for every Austinite, especially children, and bridging that kind of urban-rural divide in Austin that still exists.
Representative Israel, we'll begin with you.
Yes, Sonta, I firmly believe that Austin has a long history of supporting green space and open space, and we value it as part of our culture. And at this moment in time, as we deal with our crisis of not enough housing, and as we plan for more housing, we can plan for more housing and plan for more open space and parks and childcare centers and greenery and sidewalks, so that things are walkable, things are connected to one another. There is a strong connection between land use and transportation and equity. And quality of life, I understand completely the folks that were talking there. So we can do all of these things together with the appropriate planning and still reflect our community values that we have adopted over time. It's a great, beautiful city, and this is part of it. So thank you for that question.
You mentioned connectivity. Why do you think that hasn't been done in Austin with the green space?
We have a long history in Austin of, as we have done in transportation, saying if we don't build it, they won't come. We did the same thing with housing, and we don't have to do housing in the same way. We can do row housing that has a park, that has a childcare, that is more connected and more walkable. We have allowed these obstacles to get in the way of us doing more housing. These are generations long problems, And I do believe that we're in a different time now in the midst of this housing crisis. Let's do good. Let's be better. Let's rise to the occasion.
Thank you. Mr. Brual?
I would agree with the representative. Like we've mentioned before, that there are 6,000 parcels of land owned by the city of Austin. And sometimes there's also empty lots or just buildings that have outlived their use. Taking those spaces and making greenery is a great way to boost the city and just give us some fresh air. Going back to what we said about transportation, taking something like Cap Metro and redesigning it, reevaluating it so that instead of building new green spaces, we can just make the current green spaces a lot more accessible, turning our bus rides into 15-minute bus rides for people who might live further out of the city or live in very industrious areas. Making this city into what it was before, having Zilker Park more accessible to more people, having the Greenbelt out in Barton Creek more accessible to more people, to just setting up easy spaces.
Senator Watson?
Yes, I'm really proud that when I was mayor the first time, we had a program that set aside what I believe is the most land and green space in the history of the city of Austin. In addition to that, I was mayor when we did the master plan, for example, on the Miller redevelopment when we closed that airport. And we made sure that it had good green park space inside of that, which will make a difference as we start doing the things that we're talking about to build more housing and have denser development. A key part of that is we need to make sure we're doing it everywhere so that you do have equity, and it's built in. Equity is built in on the front end of making those decisions. We're also able to take advantage of the park system as part of what we ought to be doing to address climate change. So we will be able to get a double whammy, if you will. Not only do we have the green space in parks, but we'll make a difference in climate.
Thank you. Well, you guys touched on it, transportation. So there's no doubt the mayor of Austin will have to make tough decisions on transportation. Austinites are looking for methods of viable, safe transportation with accessibility for all. Let's hear from one community member.
My question is, have you considered the tax advantages of increased real estate by capping and stitching I-35?
In addition to the question we just heard, we also received questions about how to make I-35 safer with fewer traffic fatalities, ensure the research done by TxDOT regarding expansion plans meet the city's growth, and giving citizens alternative modes of transportation like light rail. How would you address these concerns to make Austin a model for public transportation across the country? Senator Watson?
Great, thank you. Well, let's talk about I-35 first. I-35 needs to be fixed, and people in this community know it needs to be fixed in order to address congestion and safety purposes. For years, I've been pushing TxDOT to come up with better and better and better plans. And today we're at a point where we have far more stitching. We've taken out the upper decks as part of the master planning. We need to make sure we continue to try to get good outcomes on I-35, but I-35 needs to be fixed. We can do more in terms of transit. If we do that, we can make it safer. We can reduce congestion. And by the way, on safety too, with the new managed lanes, it's safe in a lot of different places and not just on I-35, because emergency medical services and vehicles will be able to use it. And let's face it, that road is a monument to racism, and it's time to fix it as best we can in light of that.
Senator Watson, you mentioned pushing TxDOT to make changes. You're in a position of having been a mayor before and a state senator. So you're on the other side where the decisions are made. So what are some things that you would push if you became mayor again?
Well, several things. One is I would like to, on a variety of the programs along I-35, not just the part that we've been talking about here in Central, but we're always continually upgrading those and working with TxDOT to get the funding for that. In addition to that, we're going to need to work with TxDOT even on Project Connect. I support Project Connect and have supported Project Connect, but part of where Project Connect is going to want to go, and we're going to want it to go, involves TxDOT property. So my relationships with TxDOT are going to make a difference in that regard.
Mr. Brual?
I refuse to expand I-35. The reason I say that is because we have to look at what I-35 does. Does it help the people of Austin, or does it help people going through Austin? Also, such a project would involve the state or bigger government authority, and that just creates a mess on its own. What I would recommend is providing transportation to the people of Austin or other pathways that allow them to not use I-35. Because when it comes to those issues, Austin taxpayers have been taking way too much of the weight, way too much of the blame. Providing things like when we come to reevaluating Cap Metro, to where we can have more efficient bus routes, have more access for people who don't have access to a car. We have a lot of areas that face low income or lower wages, yet they don't have access to efficient buses or efficient riding. Though I do want to see Project Connect face some changes, I also do support it. We need to provide an alternative rather than growing the issue of Austin.
Representative Israel.
Yep. Sonta, I believe I'm the only one in this race who has a lived experience of riding the bus a lot. My mom never got her driver's license, and my dad was a truck driver. He'd be gone for 3 or 4 days at a time. So mom would grab me by the hand and say, "Come on, we're going to go downtown." This was an exciting moment for me as a kid. This was cool. This is equity. This is the way our family operated. I rode the bus through my years at UT, and as a young professional, that number 7 is a great line that goes right through the heart of town. I want the best mass transit system that is reflective of the 11th largest city in the country. We are far, far behind in these planning efforts. And typical Austin fashion, we wait until the real estate gets really expensive, and then we say, hey, let's do a transit plan. So we need to do better. I do have some thoughts on 35 that are in contrast to my friend, Mr. Watson, and I run out of time, so I'm sorry.
Well, you mentioned that you had some thoughts, so you could definitely share one of those with us.
I strongly believe that, of course, I've been on the Transportation Committee and the legislature, and I have continually challenged TxDOT at every opportunity. They roll their eyes. They know I'm going to ask the transit question. We've got an I-35 that is a vestige of the past, that is a vestige of our racist past. I do agree we want to stitch this community together, but we've got to make it not just for a generational change. This is forever, a multi-generational change. It needs transit throughputs, it needs safety, it needs technology. The future of transportation is autonomous, and it is multimodal. I'm not a fan of the caps and the stitches. A cap is great. You can build value over time. The stitch doesn't do anything for me.
Thank you. Well, now we'll move on to demographics. The Austin demographic is rapidly changing. The need for diversity and inclusion is ever present. We heard from community members looking for equal access to resources and opportunities. And they say they want a leader who understands concerns, not just for their circle of influence, but for all constituents. Take a look.
Hello, my name is Lourdes Zúñiga, and I live in Austin for the past 20 years. My question is, how are you planning to support Hispanics and Latinos in Austin?
I would like to ask, how are you planning to support the Latino community here in Austin?
Representative Israel?
Yeah, the Latino community in Austin is proud and is beautiful and is diverse within itself. Once elected, I will be the first Latina of any major American city who serves as mayor. And what I've learned over my time in the legislature is that representation does matter. And it is important for us to recognize that the Latinos in this community are like our friends in the African American community, are becoming a smaller and smaller component. We're one of the few American cities that's losing its percentage of Latinos and African Americans. Housing and affordability is a large driver of that. Healthcare, a lack of adequate connection to healthcare, health insurance is a part of it. The Latino community has gotten the raw end of the deal on that. But I'm proud about our colorful culture, and I'm proud that I will be the first Latina mayor of any major American city.
Mr. Brual.
The first step is definitely affordability when it comes to affordable housing or low-income housing. But the next step to maintain numbers, once we start growing those numbers, is representation. one of the fastest growing communities here in Austin is the Asian American community, a community that I work very closely with. Despite them being one of the fastest growing, they have very little representation within the city government. Same thing with when it comes to the Hispanic and African American community. They have noticed very little representation when it comes to their issues. Our campaign has been centered around giving these people a voice. Rather than me standing up for them, I would like to give them a platform for them to speak. So when it comes to new projects, when it comes to reevaluations, when it comes to basic board meetings, Austin should strive to have proportionate representation, making sure that each community has a voice, someone that can speak their issues truly rather than being misguided and misrepresented by something else.
Senator Watson.
Yes, one of the first things is we need to make sure we're listening and we create new opportunities to hear what the concerns are. For example, and then act with intentionality. For example, addressing issues like where people are living in food deserts and have the inability to get to a grocery store so that they can make purchases in that way. In addition to that, I've always been a big supporter of our minority business enterprise program at the City of Austin. But what happens is we do the disparity studies, and too often those disparity studies aren't then put into effect, and we're not following through, and we need to do that. And then I'll mention something I've said before. One of the things we need to do in Austin, Texas is address childcare so that we get through some of these systemic problems in our system so that people will have access to early childhood development, which will make a difference in their ability to work. And then I have a specific program for getting people into career paths.
You talked about studies being done, but then the information needs to be used to bring forth a program. And then you mentioned childcare. So what is something you would do to make a change in these avenues?
Well, on the MBE program, which was the first thing I mentioned, we do the disparity study, and we come up and we figure out what the disparities are in terms of, for example, city contracts and letting those to minority business enterprises. But then we're not following through to make sure that we're actually addressing the disparities. That would be a key part of what I would want to see done. With regard to childcare, what I want to do is figure out a program everywhere in the city where people would have access to childcare so that they're not having to leave jobs, and we do better by those young children and change the system in which they're raised.
Representative Israel, you mentioned Austin being the 11th largest city, but also losing the most Hispanics and African Americans moving out of the area. So what are some things you think we should do to address that?
Well, we should elect Celia as the next mayor of Austin. My policies around housing and affordability were crafted with them in mind. Sonta, it hurts my heart to say that we've lost so many people over the last, not just in the last 2 years, but in the last 20 years, who have said, I can't afford to live here anymore. That's not an Austin value. It's a spirit of Austin that drew me here in 1982. I lived in a mobile home park that was run by the University of Texas, and I paid $140 a month when my mom and dad moved a mobile home down here. Those days are long gone, but there's other Celias behind me, and I want them to say, this is my home. And if we don't dramatically change our housing policies in the heart of the city to create equity and create opportunity, we will become the exclusive elitist city that I don't think any of us want to be connected to.
Similar for you, Mr. Brual, you mentioned the Asian community growing here as well. So tell me something you would do to attract more minority groups and people to stay in the city.
One of the biggest ideas that have sort of come to my attention is the idea of city hall meetings or different commission meetings outside of the actual building, putting these meetings in different community areas such as South Austin, West Austin, East Austin, having a rotating location to where instead of forcing people to come downtown, we can be in their neighborhood so that they can come ask questions, come berate us with their issues, whatever they have on their minds. But being able to provide them with the opportunity to where we can go to them rather than them forcing them to come to us.
Thank you all. Well, climate change and other environmental issues remain at the forefront for citizens. The 2021 winter storm left many with questions on everything from our grid to water conservation. As you know, that situation was life-altering and deadly for some. These community questions deal with environmental issues and what citizens expect from you.
I was wondering, as mayor, what will you do to help Austin address the coming climate change for Austin?
And I just wanted to see, as a mayoral candidate, what the mayoral candidates are planning to do with that early beginning of a program for resiliency in face of water, grid, air quality, water quality, availability of water, those solutions to make Austin livable into the future as we face some extreme weather possibilities.
And one more question is, what more can Austin do to reduce its emissions? More city EVs, more solar panels on city buildings, charging stations at all city libraries, etc. There are a lot of big topics. So as mayor, what can you do to address climate change? We'll begin with Mr. Brual.
One of the first things I want to mention is, I think it was Senator Watson back when he was mayor. He did a wonderful thing of being able to reserve water for the city of Austin with making a deal with different regions up on the Colorado River. It was an amazing thing, and it's something that we need to do again, especially in the upcoming years, because back then there was a guarantee that it would last a certain amount of years, but as climate change has seemingly worsened, or at least changed, we don't have that guarantee anymore, and more deals need to be made for that. When it comes to climate change itself, it's very much a big issue that changes from city to state to a global level. But the city of Austin needs to do its part. And one of the biggest things that we could do is strive towards a non-car commute city. Everyone here in Austin loves their cars, mostly because bus rides take hours. Me going from UT to South Austin to see my own mom, if I miss the bus, it's an extra 2 hours. But being able to invest into Cat Metro and Project Connect will allow it to where I don't need to use my truck, I don't need to use my car, and allow us to have less pollution.
Senator Watson.
Sure. I appreciate the comment about the water, because I have quite a bit of history in trying to preserve our water over the long haul. And what we're going to need to do is continue that. One of the things we need to do is make sure we're not putting potable water on the ground. We're not using it in our chilling units. So I would want to expand our system of using purple pipe, try to make agreements with the state, with the University of Texas, the various jurisdictions, including the school district, so that we're reclaiming water, or reusing water, and conserving that way. We're also down the road going to need to look at how we can store water in aquifers and be able to use that at another point. The Water Forward Plan is one that we need to implement. With regard to emissions, you mentioned the kinds of things we need to do. We need to have better transportation electrification and put the ability to do that all over the city. We need to go to having sustainable buildings, and we need to, as I mentioned on parks, create natural systems that will help us with the carbon.
Representative Israel.
Sonta, on water, we do need to track the Water Forward program and lean in on that. Aquifer storage is something that the city of Austin is looking at doing around the region. I'm grateful to see that happening. I'll go back to transportation, because this city needs more Hyde Parks. Hyde Park was the first subdivision in Austin. It's walkable, it's bikeable, it's safe. There's a grocery store, there's a restaurant, there's frequent bus service. In the future, we will be able to take more transit options. The future of transportation is multimodal. I was just at the ribbon cutting a few weeks ago for the Austin FC Stadium. In the future, thousands of fans will be pouring in to see a soccer match or to see a Willie Nelson concert, because Willie will be here forever. We know that. And we have to build for the future. People are not anti-transit, they're anti-inefficiency. And the future of transit is not only more people in it, but it's also electrified, and it's better for the environment.
Thank each of you for that input. Now, moving on. Well, during the pandemic, we saw widespread loss of small businesses. The massive shutdown meant closure for many. Now people are trying to claw their way back. Some are starting anew, others are rebranding, and there's even rebuilding to create successful business. These next questions deal with what you as mayor will do to ease this process and give small business owners an opportunity to thrive. Question 1. How will you make the land code rewrite process more transparent? Question 2. How will you help local restaurants and small businesses survive this economy? Senator Watson?
Sure. Let's start with the land code rewrite process. That process, I think, has actually failed because it was an all or nothing proposition and it wasn't as transparent as it needed to be. We need to seek the input of those small businesses about what the problem is. But it's not just land code issues. It's things like the permitting process that make it too hard for them to get permits. And there are fees that they're being charged that they don't understand the explanation for it. I've actually been endorsed in this race by the Austin chapter of the Texas Restaurant Association. So we've had a lot of conversations about how we can go about making some of those changes. And a key part of that is removing much of the bureaucracy, removing much of the inefficiency that's keeping them from being able to move their businesses forward. They want the transparency that you mentioned, but in addition to the transparency, they just want the results of you listening to them.
Mr. Brual?
When I think of this issue, I think of many restaurants. I think of Huts. I think of Dirty Martin's, which is now on the chopping block. I also think of stores. Lucy in Disguise just shut down. But Lucy in Disguise said something very interesting, and it was they were basically referencing the culture or the environment of South Congress, how they didn't feel like they were at home anymore. And that's one of the things that have killed small businesses. We've put more favor to large corporations. We've favored the big boys rather than the people who made Austin. And that's one of the steps that we need to take as a city, providing more tax incentives or providing more support to these small businesses because they are small businesses. One of the biggest things that, keep Austin weird was built around local business. Yet these people who move from California, from New York, from other cities, they are welcome here, but they need to show emphasis for local business. That's something that we need to share. There's a lot of things that Austin no longer puts priority on. And showing these small priorities can change a lot to saving small businesses and promoting an environment that they would thrive in.
Representative Israel?
Yeah, Sonta, we cannot afford another, we will do another study. We will rewrite the land code. That's important. We need uniformity. But we can't delay the changing our codes because it's a crisis. People are hurting. So when I think about small businesses, I think of land code in conjunction with that. Imagine if you're on Burnett Road, there's a HEB at the corner of Allendale and Burnett Road. There's more vertical, more density. And then there's Lucy's Chicken, which maybe it's because I haven't had my lunch yet. I'm thinking about some of the best damn fried chicken in town. If you can walk to Lucy's Chicken, walk to HEB, and you live in one of those units, or you live in the Allendale neighborhood, that helps build community. That helps with the planet Earth. That helps equity, and that helps those small businesses who become reliant upon that retail traffic.
Okay, well, we're talking about businesses and people have to be able to get to those. So people with disabilities are the largest minority in the country. Several members of the community have questions about what you would do to address their unique needs.
I want to know what they're willing to do to help the school district with special needs kids, because we've got a member of our family who has special needs.
Another question that came in is, what are the candidates' positions regarding people with disabilities, for example, accessible public transportation, accessible affordable housing, and higher pay for care attendants? Mr. Brual?
One of the biggest things that we've looked at is guidelines. There are federal guidelines, there are state guidelines that we need to follow. And one example I'd like to use is Beto's campaign events here in Austin. I heard of a story about someone in a wheelchair who wanted to attend his event, and when they promoted it, they said that it was wheelchair accessible. However, when they got to the event, they couldn't. There was no ways, there was no paths, and they just could not go to the event. I understand that, the Beto team definitely tried their best, but when it comes to these guidelines, that's where they failed. The guidelines are way too vague, way too broad, and need to show more emphasis. Austin as a city needs to take that code and build from it. We need to understand that these guidelines are a foundation for much more improvement. And this goes beyond just access. It comes to representation. The deaf community is a huge community here, and they've been left out of the picture. It's not just wheelchair ramps and everything like that. It's interpreters. Thank you again for having them, but there's so much more that needs to be done.
And you talk about other things, for example, the deaf community. What are some things you would like to see on a city level to address that concern?
One of the biggest things is just access to interpreters. I've heard multiple stories of doctors refusing to have interpreters, businesses doing the same thing. And it's a lot of things that show lack of understanding and a lot of care. There are times where children like me who have deaf parents are forced to communicate serious information despite being 8, 9, 10 years old. And it's things like that that's just ridiculous. This didn't used to be an issue here in Austin. Back when I was growing up, I grew up around the deaf school. There'd be deaf people in every corner, it felt like. And we never had these worries. But it's only until then, when we've become a big city and changed our priorities to businesses and real estate and numbers, that we've lost focus.
Thank you. Representative Israel?
Yeah, Sonta, I'm thinking about my mom because my mom lived a long time. She passed away when she was 93, and for about the last 15 years of her life, she was dependent on a wheelchair. She had a knee replacement surgery that went bad, so she was vibrant. She was a spark plug. But I say that because when we were all getting mom around, because Lord knows she needed to get to church and Walgreens and Luby's, and in moving mom around, we become very sensitized to certain sidewalks in some parts of town were great and smooth, and sidewalks in other parts of town were not. So this is about rollability for those who are committed to a chair, whether they're a special needs child or family. And it's also that disabilities aren't always visible. And I think we've become attuned to that in the legislature. And thank you for mentioning that, Phil. But it's all of us together. But thank you for the question.
Senator Watson?
Yes. The last part of your question that you added talked about how you make sure there's accessibility in dwellings, also with transportation and raising the wages of attendant workers. I worked on all of those things while I was in the Senate, and on attendant workers, we worked very hard to try to get salaries increased, and we got some success, but nowhere near the success that we need to have to make sure that they're well paid, and that makes people able to do more in the community. There's a specific federal program with the Federal Transit Agency that is tailored to seniors and people with disabilities. I want to make sure that we take full advantage of that so that we can help people get to where they need to get, including, for example, non-emergent medical care, being able to go take care of something that is not an emergency. So you're not doing an ambulance, but you have this other resource. So we need to take full advantage of that. And that'd be one of the things I would also look at.
Okay, our final topic today has to do with the city's first responders and staffing in those organizations. Here are the questions. Number 1, what are your plans to get Austin up to the appropriate staffing levels? We're talking about EMS, fire and police, including cadet classes. Question 2, we're seeing a significant increase in crime in the downtown district, from shooting deaths to assaults and drugs. What would you do to restore safety to the downtown district for people living in and visiting that area? Mr. Brual?
Right now, APD is working towards an agreement with the city of Austin. And when it comes to recruitment, when it comes to getting our city safer, we just need to accept that agreement, no matter the cost. Because right now we're suffering from less than 1 officer per 1,000 people, when the standard is 2 per 1,000 people. And the reason that we have all these, the crime that we have now, why we have all these murders, these thefts, these assaults, is because we just don't have enough officers on the street. And I understand the fear of some people saying that when you put more officers on the street, you just have abuse. You have racial tensions. And one of the things that we can do with the agreement is better training. making sure that we show them how to de-escalate situations, how to deal with certain communities. And there have been town hall meetings by the Police Oversight Office to help deal with that. But we just need to have that. One of the other things that we need is community service, where these officers are able to spend some time of the day, rather than doing arrests, building relationships with the community so that they no longer look like the evil man with the cuffs, and instead they look like someone part of the community.
Senator Watson.
Yes, I'm proud that in this race I've been endorsed by the firefighters and I've been endorsed by the representatives of the Emergency Medical Services Union because they know what I can bring to this. We have to be fully staffed. That has to be a priority of the city, and that includes fire, EMS, and we need to be fully staffed in our police department. Having a police department that is just and meets Austin's values through recruitment and training and supervision and a transparent accountability system is not a binary choice with having a fully staffed police department. We're going to need to figure out ways so that we can up the number of people we have in cadet classes. Otherwise, we're just continuing to dig the hole. And we need to make sure that if that's not working for us, we're bringing in people that have some training that are ahead of the curve that we can then train with our Austin values and get them on the street. And that would make a big difference in being able to address the issues that you mentioned in the downtown area.
Representative Israel.
Sonta, my personal story is important here. And I say it because it's important to know that my family has had to call first responders from time to time. As a young child, my dad had a bad drinking problem and he was a violent drunk. And I had to call police on my dad because he was doing harm to my mom. In 1999, we lost my niece to a jealous ex-boyfriend who killed her off of Riverside Drive. Officer Pedraza and APD got the bad guy. Our family got justice. I've suffered through those tragedies. And I say that because I want people to know that I understand the pain. I understand the heartache. And when you pick up 911, call 911, you want somebody to be there, regardless of your zip code, regardless of your station in life. I want our police force to be well trained. They need police oversight. I've served on the police monitor board, and I have the personal background and the volunteer background to bring to this job.
Thank you. Well, that concludes today's forum. We'd like to invite the candidates to deliver their closing statements. You'll each have 1 minute and 30 seconds. We'll begin with Senator Watson.
Well, thanks for having this forum. And I want to thank anybody that's watching now or watching in the future when it goes online, because it's an important election. Austin is, as I said earlier, not becoming a big city anymore. It is a big city. And when you listen to this and you see all the different topics and the questions that are being asked, you realize that there are challenges that we need to face. But I'm immensely optimistic about what we can achieve. What we're going to need, though, in order to achieve all these different things, first of all, we need more than 1 minute to be able to answer some of those questions, but we'll be having that. We'll have the ability to do it. And what I'm suggesting is we have to have real leadership. And the leadership that we need to have at this point in time is someone that can make a difference, has a proven track record of getting big things done to benefit our community, and is someone that has been demonstrated as having a positive way of bringing people together and building the coalitions that we're going to need. Austin in 20 years could be one of the great American, for that matter, a great international city. We start from a really pretty affluent position, one where we aren't necessarily managing decay right now. We need to address the things that will keep us from managing decay and 20 years from now being the city we all want us to be.
Representative Israel.
Sonta, thank you for the time and for guiding us through these topics. I am very excited to serve as your next mayor. I hope that you will look at our website, celiaforaustin.com. We have put forward thoughtful, bold, forward-looking policies so that we can look back during my time as mayor. I want to be able to say that we rose to the occasion, and that during this crisis that is doing harm to so many people, that we said to the nurse, to the teacher, to the bus driver, to the musician, we value you. You belong here in the heart of the city. It's going to take intentional planning and working through these situations, but I think Austin is worth it. It is a great American city. I have served in the legislature for 9 years. It's been the pride of my life to have served as a state official. But I'm leaning in on the city that molded me in 1982 when I got here to attend the university, to say we should expect more from our city. We should expect more from ourselves. And please go to celiaforoustin.com and check it out. Thank you for the time today.
Mr. Brual.
Thank you so much for moderating today. But to everyone watching, I want y'all to ask yourself some questions. Why did you move to Austin in the first place? Why did you decide to stay? And those reasons, are they still here today? If you decided to set up your family here, are those reasons still here? Is this city still something that you are proud of? I ask you to please think about the freeze 2 years ago. Politicians abandoned us. They left us in the cold, leaving us to drive through icy roads and find water and electricity on our own. During COVID, they told us not to work. They told us not to earn paychecks and pay our bills while they took vacations and different weddings to Mexico, to warmer weather, whatever they wanted to do. I sit here not because I want to. I sit here because I need to. The city of Austin has been abandoned by those who promised to watch us, to serve us, to hold responsibility and accountability. It is time for Austin to elect someone who is an Austinite, who shows the commitment to this city and who survives, who struggles with them, rather than watching from a lofty penthouse.
Well, this brings us to a close of ATX Decides, the Austin Mayoral Forum. Phil Brual.
Thank you so much.
Representative Celia Israel.
Thank you, Sonta.
Senator Kirk Watson.
I appreciate this opportunity. Thank you.
Our thanks to all of you for your time today and for your commitment to the city of Austin. Like any other major city, we face many challenges. It's important for all Austinites to find a leader who represents their point of view. Here are some important dates to remember as the election day draws near. The last day to apply for a ballot by mail is October 28th. Early in-person voting begins on October 24th and ends on November 4th. And Election Day is November 8th. Please remember that your voice and vote matter. I'd like to thank today's American Sign Language interpreters, Sarah Carmody and Diane Bostic. At Austin PBS, we are committed to keeping our community informed. We hope this discussion will be helpful as you make your voting decisions. On behalf of Austin PBS, I'm Sonta Henderson. Thank you for joining us.